This is a very special hunt to me. SIKA deer in Maryland. That's this episode of Death by Bunjie. If you are new to Death by Bunjie, or if you are an old-time friend of Bunjie, either way, please go to deathbybunjie.com and sign up for our email newsletter. It is free, and of course, you can unsubscribe at any time. SIKA deer, or as Babe Winkleman calls them, SIKA deer, whatever you call them, they are a very interesting little species. They're like a miniature elk that lives in the swamps in Maryland. 6 or so of them escaped about 100 years ago from a farm down there, from an estate down there, and they have turned into a population, a free-ranging population of about 15,000 deer, and 3,000 or 4,000 of those every year are harvested. Bunjie and I went down there in Maryland, you may recall. We spent almost an entire week there looking for these little creatures. We're unable to even see one in person. Now, they had been hunted for a long period of time by the time that we got there. The shotgun seasons, the rifle seasons, archery seasons, muzzleloader seasons, all of that had been going on, and those deer were pretty much nocturnal by that point. For years, I have had in the back of my mind this desire to go and chase one of these deer, to see if I could kill one of these deer with Bunjie. So we go back again in October 2019 to see if we can get that job done. The SIKA deer rut occurs in mid-October around Columbus Day. So I figured that's a good time to go. The stags might be up on their feet. I might be able to hear some bugles, which is like the highlight for anybody from northeastern Pennsylvania who grew up without even knowing that these deer existed. That's a pretty exciting thing. So I certainly was hoping to get some of that action as well. These hunts take place in a totally different part of the world. This is a marshy swamp. This is not the north woods that I'm used to hunting growing up here in northeastern Pennsylvania. This isn't even the suburban or agricultural type settings that I've hunted in Maryland. This is swamps. Now, I was familiar with that when I went down there in January. I had to wade through some water. You got to have some high boots. You got to be able to get in and out of your stand. We're on the eastern shore of Maryland here. The Chesapeake Bay surrounds this area. So there is a salty, brackish water. It's got a little bit of salt and fresh water mixed together, but that sort of permeates the entire area. Wherever you go, you're going to be getting your feet wet. These deer thrive in this environment. Whitetail really don't inhabit much of that same environment. They don't overlap an awful lot, but the SIKA deer do seem to thrive in this wet environment. This is a little bit different than our January trip, however. There have been some hurricanes off the coast elsewhere in the world, and they have made the tides rise in the eastern shore region of Maryland, in these swamps, in this marshy habitat. In fact, I couldn't even drive my car to the hunting stands. The guide that I was hunting with had to drive us in and out of the hunting locations because the roads were all flooded. In fact, in some spots, we were driving through nearly 18 inches of water. And this is on a hard road. This is on a paved road with the yellow lines going down the middle, not one that is designed to take on a lot of water regularly. I've had to hunt before with deer taking into account wind direction, all that good stuff, of course, but this is the first time I've ever had to take into account the tide when hunting deer. In fact, you have to figure out whether or not you can get to the hunting location, but in addition to that, whether the tide is going to make it so you can't get out of your hunting location that night when you're done hunting. You got to make sure that it's going to be safe to get in and out both ways.
I live my life for me alone. It's up to you to set your own tone. Your life is yours, but this one's mine. Don't force me to get in your line.
This is a whole different experience for me to sit in these conditions and hunt. I brought with me chest waders, however, very important to get the job done. I finally do set up in a very familiar tree stand in Maryland overlooking one of the feeders. It took us over an hour to get to the tree stand that night, driving through all of that deep water. Waded out there and got all set up, seeing the birds fly through the air and looking over that beautiful swamp. It is an incredible part of the world. Baiting is legal in Maryland, and frankly, the way these swamps are, it'd be pretty difficult to hunt one of these deer in any other method, in any other way. My hat goes off to anybody who tries to do that. On public land in Maryland, you're not allowed to bait. And folks that can get the job done on public land, my hat goes off to you. With a guide, however, on private land with private leases, private property, I'm going to be hunting over these feeders. Half an hour before dark, the feeder went off in front of me, and I heard my first bugles ever, the first time I've ever sat in a tree stand and listened to SIKA deer bugles. Hearing those stags off in the distance got me pretty excited. Unfortunately, none of them came to the feeder that night. I did, however, have a couple of muskrats make their way in, inspecting the area. I've had squirrels at feeders before, but never muskrats. On another night, same situation, driving through deep water, wading through water over my belly button to get to the tree stand, and setting up on basically an island out in the middle of this marsh. Gorgeous part of the world. I cannot say enough about that. It is unique. It is beautiful. Setting up in a tree stand there, however, the water was so deep that I couldn't even cock the crossbow at the bottom of the tree stand. I had to set the crossbow up on a log that happened to be sort of floating or laying there next to me in order to put my foot on something dry to cock the crossbow. In fact, the bottom rung of the tree stand had water over it. I could not believe how deep the water was in this area. I climb up in the tree stand, get all set up, and this is no doubt going to affect my hunting on this trip. The rising tides, the rising water does concentrate those deer a little bit more, you would think, because it reduces the amount of dry ground that there is out there for them. But it also cuts down on their movement, I believe. And I don't think you're going to be as much action to deer coming in to those feeders this way. When I finally get down at the end of the night, make my way out of there, there's actually a little bit more water than there was coming in. The water has risen a little bit, but I make my way out safely, and we will return for more SIKA deer action later on. Another thing about these swamps, mosquitoes. Once the sun hits the horizon, all of a sudden there is a hum. It's almost like somebody flicked the switch. And all of these little mosquitoes all around you just, and it just turns on all around you. Got to have a thermocell in this style of hunting. In fact, you might want to bring two. On another night, we get set up in another tree stand with which I am a little bit familiar. Bunjie and I had hunted here in January, climbed up into this tree stand. It's in some tall pines, a nice little ponderosa pine stand, but it's still wet everywhere you look. Again, we're wearing waders on the way in. I get all set up. Nice, fresh coat of corn on the ground. The guide has been kind enough to bring with him and carry in a bag of sweetened corn, sweet feed type corn, and set that out for the deer. The sun finally sets. I watch a beautiful sunset on the horizon coming through those pines. The feeder goes off and I get to hear that as well. I hear other feeders off in the distance as I have before, and around that time I start to hear a bugle or two off in the distance as well. Another thing about having water levels this high is that you can hear deer coming to you. You're not going to mistake somebody walking through that water. It makes a heck of a racket. I hear some footsteps off to my right. I look. It is a hind, a doe, a mother, and her fawn. They spot me, however, and eventually they trot off through the swamp. At least I'm seeing some SIKA deer. These are the first SIKA deer I have ever seen in person. That's fantastic. That's exciting. Off to my right, I hear more footsteps coming through that water, splashing through that water in my direction. Coming to the corn is a spike stag, a stag SIKA deer. Now that really gets my heart pumping. I see him coming through there, and there's no mistaking where he's headed. He is headed to the feeder in front of me. There is no question about that. He comes through, and in fact, there's so much water here at one point, he goes through a ditch. Now, I actually have a 25-yard shot off to my right. I could take that shot, but there's really no reason to, because I know in my head that this deer is headed in one direction. He's headed to that feeder. He's going to give me a shot. He makes his way to the feeder. He tastes that sweet feed that the guide had set out for me. He positions himself nicely. Then he looks in my direction, and I get a little bit nervous. Wait a minute, is he on me? Did I make a sound? Nope. Back to eating, he eases forward. Bunjie and I, oh yeah, we're gonna take that shot. That shot looks perfect to me. It looks like a perfect heart shot. He turns, he runs, and I immediately get nervous because he's running back into the thick stuff, the tall stuff, all the reeds and the swamp and the marsh and everything else. And I think, man, listen carefully, listen closely, because you want to be able to find this deer. There's no way you are going to follow a blood trail through water. That's just not going to happen. You have to be able to listen and hear where that deer goes down and hope that you can pinpoint that location later on. He turns, fortunately, and heads back in the direction from where he came. He heads back across those pine flats, out across all of that water. I can hear him splashing, then I can see him. I follow him with the camera to make sure that I can see where he is headed. And as he makes his way off into the distance at 60 or 70 yards away, he finally crashes on that spot. Bunjie and I have killed our first SIKA stag. I raised Bunjie triumphantly in the air. I could not be happier with this outing. Not only is this our first SIKA stag, but this is also the first deer I ever shot wearing waders. I was wearing the waders, not the deer. These deer are such a precious little animal. Perfect heart shot on this deer. In fact, I actually did hit the heart and sliced right through the heart. Easy pass through, but still he goes 80 yards or so. If you go the entire distance, it was like 80 yards he ran. What a tough little animal. Probably 15, 20 pounds of meat out of this. He probably weighed 50 or 60 pounds total. Not a problem for me because I was able to drag him back out of that swamp with no problem. What a world we live in. I am so happy to have had this opportunity to go hunt a free-ranging SIKA deer, this precious little animal that somehow manages to survive hurricanes and make its way from a population of 6 to a population of 15,000 right here in my home country. If you choose to hunt SIKA deer, I'm going to do more videos on SIKA deer hunting over the coming months, so make sure that you subscribe. Go to deathbybunjie.com and check out our email list also so you can stay on top of things, all things Bunjie. Make sure you do that, and I'll be doing more videos about this down the road. If you are interested in SIKA deer hunting, I will have some information on that coming your way. It is a special, unique opportunity. And as long as we are respectful to the folks down in Maryland who make this happen and make this possible, then I think that that is something that every crossbow hunter out there should try. Thank you for watching this video, and until next time, all hail Bunjie!
Second state is #1 in my book.
All right, we're doing a SIKA deer hunt. Okay, we are recording. Then we go on to that. Boy, those lights are just flickering. What's up with that? I finally set up in a very familiar tree stand, one I'm familiar with. What was that? Is that a mouse? Gotta get those mouse traps going. Let's talk about the mosquitoes too. All hail Bunjie! Now we'll do the Pennsylvania doe. We'll turn this dude off right here.